We're glad to see you here today. I'm just so blessed. I have a good friend with me, Kathy Edelman. And in my 4 years here, nearly 4 years, it's been a blessing for me to get to know her and her husband, Brian. And I've been impressed with their faith that perseveres through tough times. I think of Romans chapter 8, verse 28, God works all things for the good of those who love them. And so we acknowledge that there's things that are not of God, like a pandemic. But somehow, some way, God works, he infuses goodness into bad circumstances. And I think Kathy's got quite a testimony to share. So, Kathy, why don't you share a little bit about what's going on right now? You said to me here recently, Brian's gone through surgery, and how's he getting along?
Well, it's good days and bad days. He struggles. Things aren't perfect. We're still waiting to see. He's facing 4 surgeries. He's going to have kidney stones removed out of all 4 of his kidneys. He has 4 kidneys rather than 2. And we spent a lot, as you well know, we spend a lot of time in the home these days, and more for probably Brian and I being of that group of age-wise as well as health-wise. The corona could be devastating for either one of us.
Mm-hmm. We don't want to be Pollyanna. You've experienced some really tough times. Can you share a little bit about your journey up to this point? You and Brian together, with your health issues and what have you.
Well, as many of you know, I took a fall in 2016, and among breaking bones and that type of thing, I wrenched my back, and my back has been kind of the negativity of this whole thing, and I just don't seem to get back to where I was. And like Brian says, you're 4 years older now, and that's true, 5 or 6 years older, but I still want to be better. And so I just left therapy again. I started therapy and exercising on the way to here. And I knew I was going to be out today, so I asked Pastor if we couldn't be together. And Brian, as many of you know, the majority now of what's stemming from his challenges has been the wound that he's had on his backside. It was a year ago in February that it started, and so it's been a long journey. And it's still frustrating, and there's been comments from him about having to go to a care center, and as of right now, I'm very, very happy to take care of him, and as long as I'm doing a good job, and the wound doctor says things are going good. So,
good.
But it seems like last week he just had a screw backed out from a surgery he had 15 years ago when he broke a couple vertebrae. They put some hardware in there, and because of all the weight that he's lost, that screw backed out and caused a sac of fluid, and they were concerned what was in that fluid, very concerned. So rather than to just lance it and start there, they decided to actually physically do an incision and go in and look. And they've sent it in. We haven't heard back yet of the results, but we're hopeful that it was removed. It is at the top of where his original problem he had when he had cancer when he was 26 years old. He's now 56. So this all stems back from the wounds, and the things that he's developed have all stemmed back from the massive radiation that he had when he was 26, so 30 years ago, which at that time they told him that he was terminal, he had less than a year to live. Wow. And that he would never walk again. And it's been 30 years. He did learn to walk again, and they got the cancer stopped. They couldn't remove all the tumor, and so they removed what they could, but they did massive radiation, and now that radiation long-term is breaking down his bones and his tissue and all that, and therein lies where he got the wound. So the original wound has healed, but it still is in depth, and so we can't let it close. But he developed even a larger wound Thanksgiving time, and he's frustrated, and yet he knows that he is so grateful that it has brought him 30 years of I tell him bliss, because we've been married 20 now. But you know, we struggle every day, and sometimes, you know, me traveling for all those years, we weren't together all that much. So the combination of me getting hurt and then having to be together all the time, and now for sure with the pandemic, we have struggles there. But you know, God says that's all part of being normal and part of being a human being.
In that, you came into an understanding that brought meaning to you in a special way through that book in particular. You talked about Dr. Crabb's book, Finding God. What really spoke to your heart on that in that study?
Well, I in the first page, on the very sentence on the bottom of the first page, and it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, like, wow, I mean, that's so simplistic. And it says, our number one role in being a Christian and being in tune to God is this statement: we are here to know the Lord Jesus Christ. There's no other reason for living.
Amen.
I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks. And so it was interesting, because I was like, oh, I don't know about these Christian books, and you know, and I have a hard time putting it down, and I've got lots of things that are highlighted. But one of the things is that we are out of the garden with no way back. And so we're out of the garden, we know that. It also says that we need to come to God on his terms. And I was looking on the internet this week, and it said, God is always looking to redeem, restore, renew, and forgive. So loss is a part of our lives. It, you know, whether it be loss of health, loss of finances, loss of people in our lives that pass, loss of monetary. There's lots of things that we can have a loss of. And yet we have to understand that in those times of darkness, that God forges us forward as a new person. Every time we let go of that, and let go of some of that negative thought in our mind about how bad life is, and you know, Brian is a blessing to me every day. Drives me crazy some days, but he's a blessing to me every day.
That's awesome.
Because in the midst of his darkness, he always forges forward. And I think that if he can do it, I can do it.
And one of the things I really appreciate about Kathy and Brian and others that have given witness in our congregation is that, you know, using that hurt to minister to others who are hurting. And I thank God that there are people that I can relate to, especially when I'm going through a hard time, where they're not just trying to paint a colorful picture, but to be honest and say, I'm really hurting, I'm really struggling, but out of this, I've learned a few things, and I've seen more joy expressed in a soul who reaches out when they get outside of themselves to care for the needs of others.
I think in times like this, we have to stay in touch with each other, and yet I always like to learn, and I learn often through books. I know Brian loves the Educational Channel, and he likes Iowa Public Television, and he's gotten me started in watching the Mountain Men in Alaska and all, I do watch a little TV for them.
That's good.
But we all develop in different ways, and for me, books is a way, listening to music, that type of thing. But know that there are things in place when you have to stay home in your house. Thank God for computers. Thank God for cell phones. Really, thank God, because I mean, just think if we didn't, if we didn't have it right now, we would feel so isolated. And I think people still get frustrated. I get frustrated. I thought, when I retired, I had all these ideas of what I was going to do when I retired, and travel and do different things and being active and all of that. And for me, it changed with one fall on the job. And so I still like to do a lot of things. And Brian goes, "You got to look at your age, Kathy." And I hate when he says that, but it's true.
We all do.
But many of you out there, senior citizens, you know what I mean. I mean, it isn't like we necessarily thought when we turned 65. And so, just aging in place, so to speak, just letting it be what it is. It's this pandemic is terrible. And we always think, well, it could have come at a different time.
Let's focus on one really good thing that's kind of come out of this whole ordeal. What's spoken to your heart the most with this pandemic in particular?
I just think of God pushing me further into reading. Brian knows a lot of things in the Bible that he can quote, stories he can talk about, and I always enjoy that. When I say something or whatever, I can depend on him to possibly, things that he knows about the Bible that I don't.
Well, Kathy, you're such a blessing, and we thank God for you and Brian and your witness. And it's healthy. It's healthy to realize that this isn't a perfect world, but God's in charge, and we find meaning and purpose, and we find our peace by turning to Him in hard times, and how He can use this time, for a greater good if we just walk with Him and trust in Him. We thank you for your testimony today. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.